I joined the Navy. Technically, it was the Navy Reserves, but that didn't stop everyone I knew from being either alarmed, confused, or horrified by my decision. Although this was 2004 and people were less disappointed in the war than they are now, most of my friends and family at that time were either opposed to the military or completely uninterested in it. My mother, for example, was appalled, which is an understatement. She had had an unsuccessful stint working for the man in her early 20s, and she came out as a nonconformist, co-op joining, war protesting, Jesse Jackson loving hippie. My father, on the other hand, was the single person who was pleased. In fact, he was proud. He too had been in the Navy, and he had had a much more pleasant time of it. He'd been a cryptologist on a ship near Morocco. This seemed to me the most adventuresome life anyone had ever known, and I wanted to do it too. He had a ton of Navy stories, and he still knew every stanza of Anchors Aweigh by heart. He came to visit me right before I went to basic training to give me pep talks, share a few boot camp survival tips, and more or less relive his younger days. We had beers together at the waterfront, and I felt like we were old sailor cronies. It was the first time I'd ever hung out with my father as a peer. This was significant because I had been a difficult child. Not just when I was an actual child, but continuing long into adulthood. Like still. Yeah. Today. I was always broke, lonesome, misguided, and dating someone lame. He never acted disappointed in me, but it was impossible for him not to be. Though years later, I'm still unclear why I went into the Navy when I was drinking with my dad. I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. I wound up being in the reserves for 4 years, and it turned out to be much less action-packed than I expected. One weekend each month, I wore a uniform and worked for the Navy. I got paid, but not much, and I was trained to do nothing more technical than sort personnel files and do calisthenics. After 4 hours of these heroic activities, everyone took a break and ate lunch at the hometown buffet. Then I returned for more filing. Having been indoctrinated with this gung-ho, storm the Bastille mentality by my recruiter, performing the mundane tasks of an underutilized secretary was disappointing. If it wasn't for Petty Officer Fletcher and Petty Officer Fletcher, I never would have made it. Yes, there were 2 Petty Officer Fletchers. They were brothers. I had a debilitating crush on them, mostly because they embodied this whole muscle-bound, yay America mentality that I was drawn to at the time. And they were gorgeous. They were 2 golden Republican slabs of patriotic beef. One was slightly more muscly than the other one, so I called him Big Fletcher and the other one Little Fletcher. They were smart and funny and charismatic, and they completely dominated my sexual fantasies. Now, I didn't join the Navy so I could file medical charts and drool over petty officers Adonis and Apollo, but I learned to go with it, and besides, I was getting the GI Bill, a small paycheck, and 2 free meals a month at hometown buffet. Still, I thought I'd be out on the shooting range, driving camouflage jeeps around obstacle courses, dodging enemy fire, and wearing my battle dress uniform with a knife strapped to my ankle. I hoped we'd spend the entire weekend at sea. I planned on singing Navy songs, marching to cadence chants, doing push-ups and saluting people, getting the American flag tattooed across my chest. I tend towards idealism. But the recruiter gets you all fired up to bravely serve your country and take a bullet for the president. This is an exhilarating feeling no matter who the president is. Still, there was boot camp to come. I was terrified. At the time, I worked at Nordstrom and was perky and well-dressed. No one had expected me to enlist, and certainly no one expected me to succeed. Fuck them, I still went. And against all odds, I was amazing at boot camp. I was as surprised as everyone else when I discovered that I was really good at marching and eating fast and doing push-ups and running 6 miles and sleeping on an uncomfortable cot. I was high as a kite the whole 3 months, basically fueled by my own awesomeness. I had never been good at anything, and I was good at this. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to return to San Diego and go back to being bad at other stuff. Take note. The military will drive out of you whatever modicum of shame you formerly possessed. That's how I learned I was also good at relinquishing my dignity. This was exemplified by a specific memory I have of myself sitting on a toilet in a cramped stall, taking a shit behind a flimsy curtain in a room full of 40 other women. These are the kinds of memories that stick with you. For months, we had all been a bedraggled mess. But somehow, I remember that curtain more than anything. And I'd been so carefree before, I mused as I sat there. I didn't have a lot, but I had many things I valued. Family, friends, a bathroom with a door that locked. I even missed my roommate, Dave, an obsessively clean gay man who tried to teach my cat not to shed. He was newly out of the closet, and since I was preparing for boot camp, it resulted in a kind of odd couple household. I exercised like a fiend, quit smoking, discontinued all drug use, and moderately reduced my alcohol intake. I was becoming a warrior. Meanwhile, my roommate was turning our North Park apartment into the garden of earthly delights. I would come home late each night after working, going to school, exercising, and drinking protein shakes. And there would be 11 stoned gay men on my couch, eating sugar-free Jell-O and watching the David Chappelle show. It was my favorite part of the day, and it brought me to a significant discovery. Believe me, there is no institution on the planet more ridden with empty rhetoric than the military. But if you shift through all the bullshit, there is real beauty at the heart of it. If you have really sworn your life to defend your nation, it's a good idea to examine who your nation is. It's a couch full of stoned gay men eating Jell-O, watching Chappelle. At boot camp, behind that curtain, I had these special moments of clarity. I had another special moment of clarity the first day of boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. I'd been traveling all morning, up at 4, a flight at 6, no drinking on the plane. This was a nonstop flight to Chicago, and I hate to fly. I don't take a flight from San Diego to San Jose without washing a Xanax down with a Bloody Mary. Imagine my pitiful state on the plane. I was sleepy, sober, and being taken to what I envisioned to be a concentration camp in Siberia, which it basically turned out to be, only colder. I was beside myself with apprehension, and when I got to the airport, they further intimidated us recruits by performing physical tests on us. They checked our weights and our heights, they inspected our uniforms, they gave us drug tests, they gave us pregnancy tests, they gave us shots. Then they turned us loose in the airport for a while so we could eat a last meal and enjoy our last few hours of freedom. Then we were corralled onto an official-looking bus that took us to Great Lakes, a town outside of Chicago and the home of the only remaining naval basic training base in the country. This is where everyone, including future Navy SEALs, begin their career. On the bus, nobody talked to one another, and this was assuredly because we were afraid to speak or move or breathe very loudly. Once we left the airport, things had become very serious. The tension was beyond palpable because this was a bus full of people who were too afraid or busy or important to join the big Navy, but we still wanted a shot at being brave and patriotic. We were accountants and chiropractors and people who worked at Nordstrom. We were ill-equipped for this kind of suffering. When we reached the base around midnight, we were all visibly unnerved. The base was stark and looming at the same time, and the seemingly endless buildings were large and bleak. The ground was covered with dirty, slushy snow, and it was very dark. There was no one in sight except for our party, recruits and drill sergeants. Somehow, we all accurately assessed that we weren't going to be sleeping anytime soon, and that made the demoralization complete. We strapped our green duffel bags onto our backs, and I sensed that everyone was becoming lonely and regretful, and it was that terrible point during a hardship where everyone's true colors start to come out, and they are often shameful and weak. Amid all this wretchedness, as I was struggling in my big black boots, in my uncomfortable uniform with a giant bag full of more uniforms on my back, it started to snow. And that's when I began to cry. I cried silently. The snowflakes landed softly on my face, and I reflected on how much I wasn't in San Diego anymore. I was not crying because I was sad or weak or cold or tired, but in a response to a growing ache in my belly that I was only just beginning to understand. I tried to process how different I was feeling. I had never known that I was strong. I had started to doubt that it was even worth it to try. But I knew at that moment in the dirty snow that I was strong, and that the brave and heroic me was finally surfacing. I cried out of pure gratitude. The snowflakes mingled with my tears, and I marched onward.